on Spruce Street. Made me smile like Gucci sweet. I bet I could get her number sometime. She was just standing there as I walked away. I should've said hi. I thought to myself, oh, you're way better than the one before. Got a lot from just looking at her eyes, and I can't stop, can't get her off my mind. Oh, if I look back, will I ever forget those eyes? Yeah. The city is too bright at night.
Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Oh, that's great. Why is that not working? Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. 1 second here. We're going to get started in a few seconds here. Just going through, trying to hack the technologies, as always. Trying to keep them working. There's a weird bug where if I have Discord open at the same time as I have Streamlabs, my microphone and camera don't show up right. And that stinks. So I always have to go through and manually do some stuff, and then usually I just end up closing Discord because it doesn't play well together for some reason. I don't know why this is, to tell you the truth. I've tried to Google it and research a little bit, and I haven't found a way around it just yet. So that is that, I guess. So let's see here. I'm going to close Discord so that we don't get cut off here. I've got Android Studio open, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to do some SwiftUI stuff, not Android Studio. I should probably get that off the screen and get back over to stuff. So my name's Aaron LeBeau. Welcome to the stream on Thursday. I hope you, like I said, you're having a great day. We're going to do some SwiftUI stuff. Who am I? If you're new to the channel, my name's Aaron LeBeau. I'm a developer advocate at Couchbase. I have been doing mobile for about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer than that. Really the last 8 years probably of my career I've been really highly focused on mobile, doing everything from Swift, Object-C. I started in Object-C on iOS, moved over to Swift, but also done a lot of Xamarin on C#, which is a cross-platform framework. I've done a little bit of Maui, not much. I've done a lot of Android native development and also Android with Jetpack Compose, which is what I probably spent the last year and a half doing. A lot of Android Jetpack Compose. I can speak a lot about that with Kotlin. Also done some small amount of Android development, native development with Java, but really the world kind of moved over to Kotlin quite a while ago now, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago maybe even they announced it. But really I'd say the last 3 years a lot of developers are trying to get into Kotlin. There's obviously still a bunch of native a lot of stuff still out there in Java, and Java ain't going away anytime soon. It's a pretty big language, but I could say kind of like with Swift, it's just a better way to program mobile stuff. Kotlin has a lot of cool things. It's coroutines framework for doing async programming is probably the coolest syntax I've seen in a really long time. It does everything with cold streams, and it's a different way of doing things versus async await, which is really popular, and that's how Swift's new async framework does it. Although you could always use a Grand Central dispatchers. I think Grand Centrals is the name of them. It's been a little while since I've had to think about that, but yeah, Grand Central. I think did Steve Jobs do that? Grand. I'm pretty sure, well, yeah, Grand Central Dispatch in Swift. 2018, okay, so maybe it has been a hot moment since that came out, but, this is the new syntax. Well, new for if you were doing Object-C years ago. This is the new dispatcher for handling things for async versus sync, and it's pretty cool. It's basically how you manage threads in Swift. Big fan of it. So what have we been doing? Well, this is probably about the 9th or 10th stream here. We've been working on a SwiftUI application to build an expense reporter. That's our currently goal. We've tried to make it to work on iPad with UI, not UI split view. That's UIKit. I'll preference the entire stream with I have done UIKit for years upon years, know it very well, feel very comfortable in that world, and I could do storyboards or I could do regular just coding. I actually like storyboards. I'm one of the few people that think they're just fine because I did them for so long and I could just do them so fast because I've done them so long. But I'm relatively new to SwiftUI. I've done one other app in SwiftUI, but this is really kind of like me doing a stream to also kind of learn SwiftUI. So it's you're gonna struggle with me as we go through it and learn through some things of like SwiftUI. Mostly with like the navigation stuff. There's new stuff in iOS 16 and 17 that have come out that really kind of changed the way navigation works, and that's been the way with SwiftUI for quite a while now. So we've been working on this app a little bit, and we've hit a kind of like a roadblock in some sense that navigation hasn't been working right between iPad and iOS. If I do iPad, it doesn't work, but then if I do iOS, it does. And I've been fiddling around with that for quite a while here. I think on the last stream we talked about it. I think I'm just going to, well, this is a new bug though, that the simulator is not properly switching over. I'm assuming this is just because it's a cold boot of the simulator. I'm not sure what's going on there. So a couple of different things I'll also preference with. I am streaming from the latest version of macOS 14 beta with Xcode beta 4. So this is Xcode 15 or beta 3. I thought this was beta 4 now. I just did the update today. I wonder if I still have to do the Xcode update separately. But it told me like told me yesterday. I thought that it was installing the latest beta of Xcode. Let me just double check here, make sure that there's not two betas sitting on my computer and I'm using one versus the other. Nope, that's it. That's weird. I guess I'll have to change that. Watch that after a stream and see what's going on here. But I had to reboot my laptop. I usually don't reboot it in order to get the latest beta installed. And so that's the reason why things aren't necessarily looking right there. So this is our expense report app, and what we've been working on right now is we got a user profile to work where you can save your user profile. You can set some settings, and it saves it to a mobile database. We're using Couchbase Lite. That happens to be the company I work for, in full disclosure, and it's a pretty cool mobile database. Some things since I've changed don't necessarily are working right in iPad, but they work great on the iPhone. So one of the things that's kind of going weird on me is that like my state management, I have to click on it twice to get state to show, and there's some kind of weird thing where this is kind of happening. I believe this is a bug in iPad, because if I click expense report here, this is supposed to change out and it doesn't, even though I've like quadruple checked the code compared to their example here, which in navigation split view, they give you an example of how to do this with multiple where is it? Right here. So this is where you have multiple relationships with data, right? So in here you have, this is what you call your sidebar. This is your content, and then this is your detail. And when you select something in content, it should change detail. And if you select something here, it's like a tree, right? If you select sidebar, it's going to affect both detail and content. And as long as you have two things managed in state, right, you're able to go through then and automatically have this draw based on what changes. And state should be sending the UI. The UI should detect that, say, oh, this particular part has changed, so I'm going to re-render this part of the view. And that's not working for some reason, and I don't know why. But on iPhone, because iPhone switches over to a navigation stack, it works great. And so I think what we're going to do is, I've been caught up in this for a couple of streams now, and I don't think it's really entertaining to watch me try to figure out like why this bug exists. So I think what we're going to do is just focus on iPhone today, try to get some more functionality out, and I'm going to open a support ticket with Apple. Here's the whole thing. If you have a developer account, you may or may not know this, you get 2 support tickets a year if you renew your developer account every year, and they're free. And this is code level support. Now, I'll preface this with this. If you're going to open a ticket with Apple, you gotta have some code that they can read. Don't just be sending them like a small snippet and say this small snippet of code doesn't work. Send them a full application repo in GitHub. And if you work at a company where your code is secure and you can't send them the full repo, you gotta reproduce it in a separate repo that you can make public. Even if it's just like a POC app, I just highly recommend doing this. There's nothing worse than having somebody tell you that there's a problem and then they don't send you like the full code so you can look at to see why the problem's happening. I can just tell you I've done support for years. When I was a tech lead at the previous company I worked at, a lot of times developers would send me like an email with a small snippet of code, say, why doesn't this work? And I'm like, I don't know why it doesn't work. You haven't given me full context here. Maybe it's not even something in this little tiny small code snippet. That maybe it's a bigger thing that's happening, and you have to look at the bigger application to see that. And that's kind of a pet peeve of mine is, if you're going to give people information, give them enough information to help you, which means give them a POC, or give them some code base that they can look at that is public, that they can see and reproduce the problem so they can help you better. That's just a tip. Apologize for that. A little thirsty here, so I'm going to drink some Gatorade. You can see here on iPhone, this works a lot better in the sense that I can just click back and forth here. I can go to developer and go to database information. Now, this state bug's happening here also, so that's interesting. This wasn't happening before. Well, that tells me a little bit here that means that something's going on that's my code. It's not necessarily this other bug. So we probably should try to fix that. Hey, Matt, how you doing? I hope all's well with you today in the great lands of the Midwest. And so that's really kind of interesting. So we're pulling some information from our repository, and what this is designed to do is just give us some debugging information, because we want to automatically generate data to the database. And one of the things we want to then do is be able to see what's going on. So when we generate data, we can kind of validate that the data that we're generating works right. This is like a debug screen, basically. And anytime I build a mobile app, I usually will have these kind of things, and then I just hide them in the build process. I do pound if, environments development, show that screen, and if not, hide it so that it doesn't even get built in part of the process. And that way I can have, QA a lot of times will use this to see what's going on in the app. Especially when you're using mobile databases, because, you want to be able to see what's inside of the mobile database. And so that's what we kind of been working on the last couple streams, is getting this to the point where we can generate data. We did some really cool things on Tuesday night stream. We got our employee repository. We're looking to see how many employee profiles that we have in the database. And so we did some real quick SQL. That's one of the cool things about Couchbase Lite. It's a mobile database, but you can just write SQL against it. So, wait, what? Yeah. So this is, folks, I know this is going to sound confusing, but Couchbase Lite is a document database. Okay, so most of the time you say, well, okay, it's a document database. I know that term a little bit, and that usually means that they're JSON documents, right? Which means you wouldn't use SQL to query it. Well, Couchbase, we're a little different. We allow you to use SQL even though you're in a document database. And so SQL isn't just reserved for relationship databases. And that's a misconception that ends up happening, is that people think SQL should be reserved just for relationships because it allows you to join tables, and inside of relationship databases, that's how we relate data together. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? And there's no reason why you can't use SQL inside of a document database. It's more up to the vendor to support it as a way of querying the database, and we do. So we are supporting SQL inside of Couchbase Lite. So I just have a very simple select statement that goes through and asks the database how many user profile documents are in this specific mobile database on this device. And what will happen then is that it will check that, and it will automatically then tell me how many documents are in there. And so this is a very simple syntax. We just we get our database from our database manager. We do a query. This just does a count statement. We give it back as a value, because we have to say, like, what do we want to return back? And then this is a little confusing, but that just basically means whatever database is currently open up in this connection. That little underscore, that's something that's kind of unique. You're used to using like a table name, or inside of like Couchbase server, you would use a bucket / scope / collection. So you'd have, your bucket name .scope .collection. And we do support scopes and collections on mobile. But if you're just looking for the entire database, you don't need to use all that for querying. And in fact, in Couchbase Lite specifically, you don't query a scope or collection, you just query the database. At least that's what our documentation says. So that's why this query exists. And you can see here, we then just go through and try to get the results back. And then the results usually come back as a collection of information. And you have a couple different ways you can deal with that. They're key value pairs. And so you could deal with them like that. You could convert it over to JSON and just serialize the information back. But since I'm only getting one field back, a count, I don't need to go through all the serialization and the performance hit for that. So instead, I'm just going to use the count keyword to just get that data back. And that's the easiest way to do this. And so this key right here has to match what I use as the as statement here, so that I have a value that I can get back. Hopefully that'll make sense. Now, of course, if we have an error, we just throw back a count of 0, right? And then that would, at least give us some insight that, hey, something's wrong here. I should probably figure out why this is happening. You can't get away without using the try, catch, and switch, because of the fact that the query and the results both can throw. So those have to be try statements. So I know I don't bubble up the error, the catch, to somewhere else yet, but that's something that in production you should probably do, is you should have some kind of log manager that's grabbing this information, logging it somewhere so you can look at those and see what's going on. And usually, to tell you the truth, I usually use something called Apps Center that is part of Microsoft's suite of products that allows you to log out to like a central location. Just because at the places I used to work, that was we were an Azure shop, and that's a really popular way of doing logging in mobile apps. So what we're going to try to do, I guess, here is take a look at, let's first look at our models and see what we have. So we have an expense report, and that seems like it's cool. And I'm just looking because I don't honestly remember where we stand on this. It's been a couple days. We have a manager. And a manager is just a person that may manage an employee. We have departments. We've got that figured out. We have a data access object because of the way that we get data back from the database. This is like a very similar to a DTO, data transformation object, but the exact opposite. This is the envelope pattern is what a lot of tech leads will probably call it, where you envelope multiple things together, and then you go into the letter, you open up the envelope, and inside the letter is the actual data that you're looking for. Of course, we have an expense type, and this is going to be our expense report. So expense report has a bunch of expense types on it, and those may have things like charge codes and all the kind of accounting nerd stuff. We're going to probably make this a little bit easier and not use charge codes because that gets into a whole snaky kind of mess. Full disclosure, I used to work for an accounting firm for many years, so I know way more about how GL works than I probably need to know. And most of the time, expense report apps have to do with that, right? Because you're charging to a department, and that department then charges back to a code. And I've kind of explained this in the other streams that usually then is how they calculate like where that money should come from to pay you, because you're basically taking a trip. Maybe you have a hotel expense, or you have a flight that you're paying for. You're out of your own pocket, and then you're asking the company to reimburse you for that. And that's the point of an expense report. And then a standard expense is going to be just a combination of what that expense is, right? That's the actual entry in the expense report. So I know that sounds a little bit confusing, right? Because we have this expense type. Think of the expense type like a hotel, right? But then that's a type, so that's going to have some kind of coda with it, so we know how to do that in GL. But then we have to put that expense type somewhere so that the expense report knows that these are all the different expenses you had. And that's what the standard expense is. The standard expense is just like, this is a standard line in the GL, the general ledger, of an expense that you occurred. And inside of here, you'll see that we have the expense type. So you're going to be able to select that in the UI and say, this is the particular expense type I occurred for this particular line item. And that's how we talk in accounting terms. I know that if you're not worked at a accounting firm and you've never built an expense report, that all sounds like this really kind of weird inside baseball terminology. But all that just really means is that is a line item inside of the expense report, and you have multiple charges that you may be getting money back for. And so that's the reason why all this exists. So I think we have enough stuff where we can try to at least generate some expense reports. And usually I do one screen at a time. The database I can blow away anytime I want, so I really don't care because we're still in the development process. And if you're in a feature development team and you're building a mobile app, you're not going to complete the entire app in one sprint, right? So you're going to take it in little tiny chunks. And so one sprint, you may get the expense report list screen working. The next sprint, you may get the form to fill out. The following sprint, you may get the standard expense report viewer to come up. And maybe the next sprint after that, you get the editor to work and that kind of stuff. So it's a process of, you can't get everything working at once. So you don't also want to kind of do that. You want to kind of take it little bit by little bit to guarantee that your risk of regression goes down. And also this means that you can have chewable things that you can give out to people for testing versus trying to have a bunch of piecemeal things that just don't work together. So in software development, that's really kind of important to me. So what I think we're going to do here is our data generator screen. We want to have a generate button, and then we want to start generating some data to the database so we could build the expense report screen. That it's going to be a card. Let me show you what it looks like in Android, actually. So we're going to try to make this look as close as we can to Android. Now, of course, iOS is different, and I'd say if you're a native developer, you should never try to make the UI look exactly the same. If you are, then why aren't you just using like Flutter or Maui or Avalon, which is another .NET framework, which we're probably going to do on a future stream here. We're probably going to look at both Maui and Avalon and take a look at those two, because they're things I'm an expert at. .NET I know way better than I know any other platform. So you'll see here I have an expense report in the Android app. I've got its currently status is in review. It's got a date and the update date. It's got some money and it's got a description of it, and I can go in here and I can edit this expense report. You'll see here there's a description. You can see this is the manager. It has to approve my expense report. Now if I were to click into the expense report, I can see these are all the charges on the expense report. So in this expense report I did for the month of May, I had some internet access, some furniture I bought, some office equipment. Let's see here, this is office equipment, and here's a charge date, and this is what happened. It's just a bunch of sample data. This is this all was generated via the data generator that I was just talking about, because when I'm testing these screens, I don't want to have to go through and click through these. I'll make some random ones just to make sure the form works, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't want to type 100 of these in, and QA doesn't either. They just want to validate like the UI works and stuff. So the data generator just makes it easier for testing, which is why we're writing it. And it makes it easier so I can start working on this UI of listing without having to generate, how do I make sure that this UI works? You can write some mocks, don't get me wrong, but that's only going to get you so far. Real data in a database is the coolest thing to do. So that's what we're going to try to work on, is to try to get this to the point we could do these, get these screens up and running. And then once we could do that, really we replicate to the server in the cloud, like through a CoPilot or Couchbase server, and then it's super awesome sauce. So that's what we're trying to do. This Android app took me about 2 weeks to write maybe, and it wasn't a full time. I had to do other things, so it wasn't all that hard. Most of the things in SwiftUI have been struggling just getting navigation working right. In Android, I just know it well. It's pretty easy to tell you the truth in Jetpack Compose. But SwiftUI, like I said, iPad versus iPhone has been kind of a pain in the butt. So we're just going to revert that. Like I said, I'm going to contact Apple, open a support ticket on why that doesn't work, and then we're just going to instead just work on this kind of stuff and see how far we can get our app working. So that's today. What we want to do is get these expense reports, see if we can get those generating randomly here. We know that we have a data type, right? And so we know that kind of thing. So because we have this data type, we could definitely generate those randomly. Let's go through here, and that's going to involve writing to the database. So we're going to need a new repository for that and the whole 9 yards. So a lot of work ahead of us here today. Let's see here. So if we go through and build iPhone again, let me see where we kind of stand. I'm going to click the secret logo button that automatically logs me in, go into developer, and then go into, I think generate sample data just brings it to the data loader screen. And then what will happen is there'll just be a button that says generate data. And when it does that, there'll be a log that we can write to, just like a text box that says what data we're generating. That seems like a logical sense for me. So if we go to data loader view, we just got a text box here. That's not going to work for us. We'll do a vertical stack, VStack. And we can just say in our VStack, we're going to have two things. We're going to have a button and then a text view. The text view we'll have to append, and we'll have to keep some kind of log in state. So we'll have to have some kind of state, and we'll call this the var log info, and it's of type string. And we'll set it to equal to blank, and that will just get us started. And then we'll basically have some kind of action that will happen that when we click on this button. So we need a button. I know that we have a button already, so we're just going to steal a button from the view that we have for authentication, because it uses a special theme that I wrote. So if we go here, here's a button that we've used before, so I don't have to write all that code out again and make it look cool. Obviously I do have this. Where is this? I guess, wait, sign in. That's weird. This doesn't use the theme that I wrote. I just realized this doesn't even use the theme that I wrote. Where is... It's on main view. Oh, so I actually refactored this, and I didn't go back in authentication and fix it. In main view, you'll see here I have a button style, and now this button style just has all those properties in it. So I must have refactored this and forgot to go back to authentication and fix it. So this is what we want. And I'll have to put a note to myself to refactor that authentication view to use this new style, because by doing that, then I don't have to remember all these colors and all that kind of stuff, right? Super lazy. Want to make that so I can reuse it as much as possible. So let's go back to our data loader view and add that button in. Let's just go through here, add a button in. We're going to say our action is not to close the database and that kind of stuff. So we'll just leave that blank. We'll say that this is the generate data. And then button style is right. And then below that button, we need a text view. And we're going to say that this is $ log info. And we'll start with that. And on this, we're going to need to put some padding in there so that there's a padding in between this. So we'll say 40 pixels, and that is bottom. Is it bottom and then 40 pixels? Do I have this backwards? I bet you have to put the property names in. What does padding take? Let's see what the... It takes a... Let's see... 40. It takes definitely CG... That's weird. Is this because... No, I'm on the button right here, right? Right here it is. It's edges and then length. So that's what's going on. I had it backwards, so it'd be bottom and then 40. And then... Why is text not working? Text should just work with a binding. It shouldn't need anything else. Data loader view. All right, let's see. Let's run this and see what happens. We'll click this, make sure that this works, and then we'll have to make a service that does all of our data loading. So data generate sample data. There's our generate date, not data. Oh boy, got that wrong. Generate data. We should probably also just say this. What is it? Not padding. Is it V alignment? And Xamarin's V alignment. V align. Is it just a line? Let me ask our AI overlords what the. Here we go. I do have my ChatGPT in Swift. You know, how do I tell a VStack to draw a V align from top down instead of center? Because that's what's happening right now. The vertical alignment's not going to the top, it's going to center. So let's say and do a spacer after it, and it will put it at the top instead. That always seems to be a hack, but I really thought that there was... Well, leading would be the left. That's not vertical alignment. That's horizontal alignment. Leading is left, in at least in English as a language, and then trailing would be right. That's just common things from UI Kit that I know have transferred over to SwiftUI. So that is not, and this obviously it's kind of have to say ChatGPT hasn't been updated since September 2021. SwiftUI has had 3 versions come out since then. So everything that ChatGPT gives me is not necessarily guaranteed to be the best answer to this. So I've had other programs open, other AI tools that I've been testing. So this is a new one that I really kind of like a lot. This is a search engine for AI. And so this will basically, it's called PHIND, and I could just search this thing, and it goes through and uses AI to try to get you a better than what ends up happening on Google, for example, because it gives you the actual answer, then it'll give a bunch of web pages that it found the answer from. As an AI tool, this is pretty darn amazing, right? So let's say in here that if you do the frame is the way to do this. Now that seems something that's more likely. Frames obviously are how we draw the screen, or every scene should have a view, and inside the view, the frame is like a rectangle, and that is a common thing between UIKit and Swift UI. And so frames are like one of the most basic things that we can have. They usually, you can set the size based on something called a core graphics point or a CG point. And so this looks more likely. Max infinity just means that it's whatever the screen can hold, right? So if we say max width infinity, we're saying, hey, if the screen is 80 pixels, it's 80, right? If it's 5,000, it's 5,000. It doesn't matter. And that's what we kind of would want here. So this could make sense to me. Now, the cool thing is that this AI tool will tell you where it got that answer from. It'll tell you that this came from 2 Stack Overflow places that it looked up and found that answer, then gave it back. So this is like a parser that goes through it and uses the internet to find answers and then give them back to you. And it's not just development, it's like anything. So this is yet another AI tool out here to help you with things. So we have more than just ChatGPT and GitHub CoPilot. We also have this tool, for example. I think that, my personal opinion, of course, I'm going to preface this as being my personal opinion, that AI is a tool for developers. I don't think AI, at least in my lifetime, will completely take over writing code for developers, but I do believe that it will be used no different than Google, no different than Stack Overflow, and I've seen this throughout my 28-year career where we always get new tools. Everyone's afraid of them at first, and then we embrace them, we figure out how to put them into our workflow, and they make us more efficient. And that's what companies are looking for, as developers that can be efficient. And so I think that that's probably what's going to happen with AI. If you ask me, my personal opinion, of course, I could be wrong and Skynet could take over. And at that point in time, well, it was nice knowing y'all. But I think that that's not going to be the case. So let's just check this real quick here. Replace the app that's currently running the simulator. Let's rerun it again. And we should be able to see that that's aligned to the top. Now, I know that you're probably going to say, well, Aaron, wait a minute. Why aren't you using Canvas? Well, I'm on the beta right now of Xcode, and Canvas seems to be crashing a lot when I go through and try to use it. And that's exactly what I was looking for. Now my only problem is that my horizontal alignment is wrong. My horizontal is not centered, which, you know, we can go through and fix. But we're getting there from a UI standpoint. So then this just means that let's start out by saying that we know that this button needs to have top padding also. So we could just add another padding line and say top, and the top should be the status bar is 24 pixels. The navigation title is 44 pixels. You memorize this after a while. In mobile development, I'm pretty sure those numbers are right. So I think if we go down 20, it's going to look right, like normal. And then in here, we need to do an alignment here. And we're going to say alignment is horizontal alignment. And then we don't need the content line because that everything else should be alignment, horizontal alignment. And now we can just do that, and that should fix. Horizontal alignment's what I want. Do I have to do a period here and say center? All right. So ChatGPT tried to help me out with that, and I had it wrong. So let's see here. Let's go back in, check our data screen, and then we'll start writing some code. All right, sample data. That's still not right. It still doesn't have the padding right. Alignment center, frame, affinity, max width, max height, affinity, alignment, top leading. Oh, top leading. Oh, good Lord. It's right there. It'd be top, not top leading, because the center, this frame is going to take over for anything that I override here. So the frame top leading obviously, like I said earlier, that's left, because Swift UI and UIKit both allow languages outside of English or any language that reads left to right. And so leading always means wherever the text starts. In some languages used over in the Middle East and stuff, they actually read from right to left. And that's why we use leading and trailing, not left and right, because of the fact that if the language swaps the order that we generate the text, we want to be able to have that UI still work, because it's really annoying for put it this way. If somebody like told me me that they're going to develop a mobile app and I had to read the opposite way than what I'm used to reading, I'd be kind of mad, right? Be like, hey, why? You're making this in English, but you're making me read from right to left? That's stupid, right? So I truly believe that if you're going to build your app, you're going to have multi-language support, follow the proper rules of writing your UI so that you're not really making the user experience terrible for people, especially if they don't know English. And I've worked at a global company that we had to write for every possible language. I think it was like 32 or 40 languages that our app would get localized for. And so I've had to deal with this a lot. Oops, sorry, wrong screen. There we go. Now generated data is working, right? We can put a title on there to get the title so that it fills out. And that should make everything puppies and kittens rainbow good. So I just call the navigation title. And we'll just say title. And we'll just say the title is data loader. Or we'll say load data. We'll just call it data loader. This is only ever used by developers and QA, so we don't have to be super informational on this. All right, so we've got the ability to do that, but our button, we don't have anything that can happen when we click our button. That's going to be a problem, right? We need to have a service that can go through and be able to go through and generate data. The only time we'd ever use that service, though, is on this screen. So we'll definitely make that service here, but we know that we're going to need to pass in some stuff to this to generate data. And so we're going to need more than a database manager. Database manager just has a pointer to the database. It doesn't have like anything else. So the first thing we need to do probably is get ourselves a service, right? A service's job is to basically just do some work for us. And we already have a data generator service here that I made. It's just empty right now. Now, we want to start working with expense reports. So the expense reports right here. And the problem is we don't have a repository for that. So if we think about it, the first thing our data generator wants to do is generate some random expense reports. Well, if we don't have a repository, even though we have this data generator service, we have nothing that it can use. So because of that, we need to go backwards and say, well, in order to create that, what do we need to do? Well, we need to make a repository for the expense report. So we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call that our expense report repository. So this will be expense report repository. And we'll definitely use that with data. And now we have that. This is definitely going to be a class. We'll call it expense. And we have some code complete going on for us that will help us a little bit. Now, we already have a repository here that we can steal a lot of information from. So one, we know that we're going to need a database manager, right? We know we'll need a document type. We don't need a block key. So we can just kind of do here. And we can say we want to keep track of. So we're going to go here. We're going to say in our expense report repository, we have a pointer to the database and we have a document type, and this will be expense report. Now you're probably saying, well, Aaron, we'll have to do an init on this, and we'll have to take in a database manager. We'll type database manager, and then here we'll have to say self.database manager equals database manager, and that will get the database manager. We'll need some other things, but we'll start with that, the most core thing that we need there. And then obviously when we generate this, we'll have to inject this into our DI solution, which we're used to using environment objects for. I get that there's open source frameworks to do that, but honestly, I've worked at a lot of companies where we try to limit the amount of frameworks we bring in because they cause pain points. If we get to a new version of Swift and that framework hasn't been updated, then we can't update. And if there's a security flaw and we can't update our version of Swift because of the fact that that framework doesn't support it, well, that's a problem. And I've been burnt by that many times in my career, to tell you the truth, way too many times in mobile development specifically. So what I've been doing is saying, well, for this particular application, I honestly don't need a third-party tool because I can just use environment objects. That's Apple's solution for DI anyways. And so what you end up doing is on your main application, this is where we inject references to things. So you'll see here the expense reporter. This is the root of the app. And inside of here, we can go into our scene, and where we generate which views are going to show, we can inject in which objects we want to have in state or basically open, right? And so because we make all these objects here, the theory would be is that they're just going to be available no matter what. Now you'll say, well, that doesn't support lazy loading. You're not wrong. right? You're not wrong. In this particular app, I don't need lazy loading. And lazy loading would be a theory is that I don't make the repository until I need it. The whole point is that the entire mobile app expense reports are the basis of the mobile app. The repository will be used by almost every screen. So there's no reason to say, well, only load it lazily when I need it. And the init is just going to pass pointers. It's not like it's going to go get anything right away. We'll use something called live query to do that. And so because we're going to use live query, we don't have to worry about lazy loading so much. I should preface this with the saying that, if you put too many environment objects on your main view, you risk the application taking forever to load, right? That's something real, right? Because if you think about it, if the main scene has a load 50 objects into memory, that's going to take a hit on your loading time. And then usually what ends up happening is that if you want to do that, you have like another view that basically is doing that while you're doing other work. And by doing that, these are coming to memory later on. And that's another hack for lazy loading. Or you can just write something yourself that does lazy loading, that basically checks it, sees if it's null. You also can use singletons. There's many ways to solve this problem. But in this particular app, we're just going to use environment objects. We're not seeing a huge hit on physical devices. Apple's devices have really fast CPUs in them. So this isn't like we're programming for an $80 Android phone. So we don't have to necessarily worry about that. The CPUs are so fast and stuff, you're not going to notice it. Not in iOS, at least. As long as you're using anything that's like iPhone 8 or higher, you're just not going to see it. And I know this from experience that, Apple's processors are super fast these days on iPhones. And you just don't have to worry about the things you worry about in Android. In Android, this will be a totally different picture, and I would definitely recommend lazy loading. And I use Coin usually as a DI framework I use there. And that solves this problem because Android, that is a big hit when you have a bunch of different things you're trying to bring in memory at once. We kind of solved that problem though, because our first view is the authentication view and we only bring in 3 services there, and then main view comes in later. Well, these will all be created. So by theory, we're trying to spread that load a little bit anyways. And we're saying that you can't get into the app until you have authentication view. You've put a username and password that's correct. So we're kind of gating that a little bit, but we still take this hit right here in the init, right? Where we're making the repositories here. And that's going to be a hit no matter what. And that's where we're going to have to do this here also, right? So we're going to have to keep track of the database, the repository here. So we already have this user profile repository, which I should name because we renamed that and I forgot to do that. So let's go here and refactor, rename that to employee repository. And we're going to need a new variable that we're going to keep track of in memory, and we're going to call that the expense report repository, right? And our CoPilot already had the answer for that. So it's a repository, so let's accept that. We should write that code for us. Now, how am I doing that? That's a good question. CoPilot's not built into Xcode, but there is this free open source project called CoPilot for Xcode, and I've got that plugin installed. And this is, they do update it quite often, and of course it's only at version 0.20, so it's relatively new. But so far it's been working okay for me. It sometimes can glitch out a little bit. You have to restart it, but for the most part, it's been pretty great for AI stuff. So let's go in here and now say that we have our expense report or repository, expense report repository. It's going to equal a new expense report repository. We're just passing our database manager, and that's our database manager that we have here. And if we wanted to, we could put self in here, but it's not needed. This is automatically assumed, so you don't necessarily need that. Some people, some development teams will want self always there, so that it's very obvious what you're doing. I don't think that it's really helping all that much readability, so I think that we're fine here. So now that we have that, what would end up happening is we pass the buck down, right? So we have to tell main view that this exists. So we would do an environment object here, and we'd say here that in main view, we're going to say now that we have an expense report repository. And now that knows about it. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, we do have to make an observable object, so that's a good call. If we go here, we already have the syntax for that. We're just going to grab that. That's a protocol that we need in order to make that so that we can observe its changes. And let's go ahead and do that. And we can publish things. And then when we publish things, any view that sees that can see the update for it. That's pretty cool. So we have the expense report repository there. That should fix main views, or the application that we're injecting this into. It should meet that requirement. See if that's the case. It is. So now we have to tell main view about this because we're passing it in, but we don't know about, main view doesn't know about it. So we're going to go in and say we know that we want this. We're going to go into main view. I'm trying to save myself some typing. And we know this is an environment object. So we're going to say environment object var. We'll say the expense report. And that should be it. It should know without needing an init method that this comes as part of injecting in the environment objects. It knows where to get that from then. And so we don't have to write any code that says, hey, let this equal to this. And main view should know about that. So now the only issue is that we have to tell the screen, the data loader view, that this exists. And so inside of here, we would say we also want to pass that. So we're going to say expense report repository. And this is for the data loader view. Now data loader should know about that. So now data loader should be able to talk to that repository if needed. Now the only reason we need that is because the service will need it. So we see here that data loader, we actually don't have it here knowing about the other two things that we have. So let's just grab those from main view, because that way I don't have to type it in again. So if we go here, we have the expense report repository, and we need the employee repository. We'll just grab all these, and then we'll just delete what we don't need. Let's delete this out here. We'll say that we don't care about that. We already have that. There's our 3 repositories, and now we have those injected in. That seems pretty cool, right? Now, theoretically speaking, if we make the service, let's think about this for a second, because I actually don't think that this is needed now that I think about it. I got ahead of myself here. Let's remove these two, because if we say that the data loader service knows about those repositories, then all we have to pass in to this view is the data loader, and it will handle talking to the repository. And so we could just do that, right? The issue, nope, I take that back. The issue is that the only thing that needs the data loader is this one screen. So we shouldn't load it into memory until we need it. And if that's going to be the case, because otherwise, like I said, we're going to slow down the app from starting if we have just like 100 things we're injecting in. This service, navigation service, is used by everything. So it makes sense to inject it in here. Authentication service is the core basic of the application. It's going to keep track of, one, you're authenticated, and if you are, who you are. So we need that injected at the main of the application. That's why it's at the root here, right? But the other service, this is only used in this one screen, so it doesn't make sense to kind of inject it in. So instead, what we should have, now there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could do this in the init. The problem is that these, and we've talked about this in previous streams, these variables are not available in init because they're injected in via the environment. And so that's a state management thing. So every view has a life cycle of when it draws, right? And so what we want to be able to do is say on appear. And this is what we're going to say is that when we appear, we can perform some things that we want to do here, right? And so we can just say here, kill this code out, and say we want to do this particular action when this view appears, okay? And now we can do anything we want. And so the minute this view appears, we can, why is this mad now? I probably have the syntax wrong. It just gave me, wait, is it this? I have done a lot of Android development. So because of that, sometimes with Kotlin, I get the SwiftUI and Kotlin syntax confused. To be honest with you on that. And so I'm just trying to figure out what the syntax is that for on appear. I do on appear on the employee profile view. I'm pretty sure. Let's see here. Where is that on appear? It's just on appear without needing to perform. That's what's going wrong here. So let's go back to the data loader view and just say no perform needed. We just say on appear because we're not passing any arguments, and that should do it. Now what we want to do is we want to make a var of the a variable to the data loader service. This is of type, what did we call that service? We call it data generator service. And we'll just make that annullable, and we'll call this data generator. And now we have a pointer to that. We could basically go through, and usually what I like to do is I keep all my state and environment objects first, and then all my local private stuff. And I can say private local here. Is it private local or is it just private? What are the options for private? Just private? I thought it was something, file local. File local? What is the Swift equivalent of private that makes sure that it never leaves this file? I think I do this in the database manager. I guess file private. That's what file private. That's what we want. Make sure it doesn't leak out from a I think the views can be extended, and we obviously we can do extensions and stuff. Kind of guarantees that this is hidden from everybody else, that nobody else should be able to see this. This could be, if it's in this file, this is the only thing that can see it. So we need to make that nullable because we cannot make it part of the init process because these will not be in memory yet, and we need to pass those things in. So we're going to say on appear here, and we're just going to say our data self.data generator service equals data generator service and that code that it just gave me is wrong, bad. Boy, yikes. Boy, this is terrible. This is wrong in so many ways. All right, this was just a terrible idea. This was data generator service. And data generator service would definitely have a database manager. It would have an employee repository. It would have the expense report repository, and nothing else. It doesn't need the rest of this code. And we don't need this, and we probably don't need self. We can just say data generator service, and then we need an init method for data generator service, and so we probably need those 3 variables. So let's go back. We'll just make a init method with these 3. Now we can just say var, I wanted that. Get some free code writing for us, and then it should be employee repository, and then we should have var, and this would be expense report repository. Give us each line individually. It would be kind of nice if CoPilot could have just said, hey, I think I smell what you're cooking here, do this, right? And we'll probably want to make this an observable object. We'll get into why in a little bit, because really the logs that go onto the screen should come from here, because this is going to generate all the data, right? So that means that this person will be the person that knows about the logs. It will be the thing that updates the log, and then we'll just take state from this instead of having it inside of our view. And in many ways, this could be thought of as isn't really a service for the view model. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Is this really a service, or is it a view model? It's kind of a view model. We should probably do that. We should probably rename this to view model, because that's really what it is. Let's move this. And we're making an executive decision right here on the stream right now. We're going to call this data loader view model. Or let's refactor this to start out with. I'm just going to say right click and rename data. Boy, sometimes this beta is not working out for us. That's not letting me rename, so I guess I'll have to rename it by hand and then go fix it. So right away, kind of knew what I was cooking, but that means in our view we have to fix this. So let's rename this. Okay, so that should rename our Swift file. And then we just need to go into data loader view and rename this to view model. And this is, we'll just call this view model. And we'll then say in load here, we'll just say view model equals this. Awesome. So now we have a view model. And let's see here. Why is it saying here? Don't understand what its problem is. Is it because I have this on the wrong? Is this on the class or the body? Let's see. Who is this? Let's click this. That's the view, but it needs to be on the view stack. I have it at the wrong level. Okay. Wait, why? What? Cannot convert. Do I just need to do this? This file private messing up because it's saying it has to be a part of an init. This was just working. Swift, you weren't complaining when I had it at the view level. You're complaining about something else. This is really stupid. That sometimes Xcode just is not as good as other IDEs I use, where it doesn't give you enough hits of like, you know, why am I doing the syntax wrong? Obviously it's me. This makes no sense to me why it's saying that. This should be inside the V stack now, right? So we have, yes, this is V stack. And we're saying on up here, and then we're saying view model equals data loader view model. Let's make sure that data, let's just try to compile, see if this works. Nope, it's saying it's immutable. Still, it's a var. Private can't make this immutable. Vars are mutable. Let is not mutable. Can assign property self. Oh, duh. I'm not passing the reference, I'm passing the types. That was the whole thing, the whole type. Okay. This could probably go back to file private. Or not. So it's still saying file private's a problem. And maybe that file private can only be in the init method, is what I'm guessing. Let's just do a var. Let's see if the nullable not works. View model equals data loader view model, database manager employee expense report. Oh, it's the parenthesis on up here that I had that before, and that's what's going on. That's that error. View model is typed data loader view model. Let's just double check data loader view model, make sure that those are in the init. Data loader view model. We have database, employee repository, expense report, and it should be self.database equals database manager. Self.employee repository equals employee repository. Self.expense report equals expense report repository. That should be the proper for that view model. Why is this now saying cannot assign property self is immutable? I didn't do it in body. Is coming when making a new variable inside the own API function. so that's not working. Let's go over to Google, find out why this is happening. Pauses. So it's saying because it can't be changed that it's got to be state because of the fact that it's immutable, and we're changing it after the view is ran. Did we have to do that in our other view though? Where is the employee profile view? I did make them all state. I did. All right, never mind. All right, you win. I was doing it wrong. I'm always doing it wrong. State. And that should fix that. Okay. We should now, technically speaking, have a view model. The view model can do things now. We'll make the view model, and then we can tell it, you know, view model, when this action happens, we can tell the view model to generate data. So inside of our data loader view model, we can make a function that says func generate data, and we can then now just call that via our data loader view. So we can go into here, say our action is view model generate data. Now we had this right here, this string. We don't need that anymore because we're going to say that the logger comes from the data view models that. So we'll make that a publish property. So we should be able to do it on the view model. Let's say that we have a, put this at the top of our log info of type string equals, and we're going to say here log info plus equals starting data, start generation of data. And now what we should be able to do is see that inside of our view model, our view. And we can just say that this text view is going to use view model dot log info. Poop. View model could be nullable. What that does is that basically says if it's null, show the log view. If it's not null, show the log view. Otherwise, just show nothing. And that's a quick shortcut, so we don't have to unwrap it. Let's go back here, see what's going on. Go to the database. Oop, not database information. We gotta fix that screen too. Let's go to generate data. Nothing is showing up. That's weird also. That must be some kind of defect where the title doesn't know whether to draw it big or small, and then it just draws it small. So, but the worst part though is that I should be seeing that update, and I'm not. I am calling the function here. Let's see if that happens. And then let's also go into our view model and see whether or not we're publishing that. Okay, so that's getting called. We delete that breakpoint. We can tell it to continue, see what's happening here. So we are updating log info. Okay. Okay. But the view doesn't update. Is this because we have to tell this $sign? So the other way that I know of is that Why is the publish not seeing it? And employee profile view, let's take a look at this. It's a state, it's not published. And then when it's held in state, you basically just use the $. So instead of publish, let's see if we can just make this state. And then we'll have to import SwiftUI because it won't know about that. State is part of SwiftUI. And then we can just say that. Now what we should be able to do is data loader view. We should be able to say $sign here. It's not a string. Oh, view model is not state. That's what's going on here. No, view model is state. Let's see if it works if I set it to state. I don't think it is. I forgot to take that breakpoint out. Yeah, we're not getting the message at all. Huh. I think how I could do this, I can always keep view model in memory by doing this and then making an optional load data. And I think this is how I did it on the other one. So I think what I did here is I said, instead of having this in a init, these are all optional nullables. And then what we do here is we just call this func load state, set state. Set. What did I call it in the other view model? Load state. Be consistent. And now what we can do is we can say since it's so nullable, we'll go through here, say data loader view. We can now say that this is not nullable. This is always going to be available. And we can say here that this is not nullable. And hopefully now this will work. And the last thing we need to do here is instead of this, we have to say self view model dot load state. And we call that like that. And this would always be set, so we don't have to worry about it being null. Still mad about not having a state variable. The $sign for state. I think that's still going to screw us over. I don't think that's going to work right. Why isn't it running? That should do it. See if we can get our data loader to start logging some stuff. Still, the logger's not showing. Hope everybody's having a great Thursday if you're watching this live or if you're watching this on video on demand, which seems to be a more popular way to watch my videos. Probably you can watch it at twice speed, right? And kind of just search through, look for the nuggets of information. If you're coming on via YouTube or Twitch on video on demand, welcome. I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you're having a great day. I'm right now trying to figure out why my state is not getting sent, even though I know for a fact that my view model here, I accidentally closed it, view model. See, I don't think I need to make this state. I think this can just be published. because we want to just publish any changes that happen. That's why we have a observable model object. And we just want to say anytime that this changes, publicize it. And so this should be plus equals should work. I mean, we could do this. And that, I mean, that should do it. That should sort of publish. This is what you could do as a combine, but my understanding is that SwiftUI, you don't need to use combine for this anymore. And I know back in the old days, I've done a lot of combine, and that's worked. I mean, where is my... So I'll show you some combine code real quick here. It's a messaging framework, and you'll see here that we basically make an observable object. We use combine for it. We say that object will change, and then if the value changes, we send an update on the that it changed. And then by doing that, anytime that you use this variable, we get it. So we could do this. Watch. This probably will just work out of the box. And then I'll just be upset because we shouldn't have to do this, my understanding. But this is the combine way of doing it, and then we could just say that this is not published, that it's just this. And then what would happen is we would say instead, where's the, it's the did set. So we'd have to set it to default value, and then inside of our setter, because we have setters and getters, right? Inside of our setter, we would say, and then we would go here and say did set, and then we'd say inside of here, object will change send. And so what would happen here is that combine now would be the thing that's basically sending the message. And since this is an observable object and stuff, if we make a reference to this, this should see an update. Now, my understanding is this is exactly what publish does, by theory, that you shouldn't need this because that's what the app publish does. And I'm still not seeing it actually though. Let me do, it's there a second time though. So if I do it, so this has been something that's been happening quite a bit, that the view doesn't see it until I go back into it. See, now it's seeing it. So I have a problem with the navigation stack where my view appear, either view appears happening or something else is happening where we're not getting the data in the timely manner that we should. Is it because of the loaded state? This is definitely a problem we have to solve, right? Because that's just what's going on. This has been happening on all the views except for, this is also happening on the information view. What it's not happening on is the expense report view, but expense report, or not expense report, on the employee profile view, because that's because we set these as state variables. And so state knows when it changes. And then what ends up happening here, I think, is it, I do load state here. I set the state here. See, this doesn't, employee profile, I don't have a view model for it yet. I haven't refactored this out to do that. But in load state, we set the data to it. We shouldn't need this though. Does that work though? Does that fix it? If that fixes it, then we have to figure out why the view model is not working like it should, because the view shouldn't need a reference to it. So what would happen here is we'd say that we'd have a state object var, well, this doesn't, think about this for a second. Does this need to be state even? I don't think so. You would, is state what's screwing it up? 1 second. Let me just check here to see if state's what's screwing it up. I mean, I know how to make this work, but I don't like what I think I have to do here. What I have to do is make a private var. So I just say state var log viewer log info of type string equals this, right? And then what we would do is we'd map it inside of an appear here. We'd say on appear, we'd say view model, then we'd say log info equals view model dot log info. But this shouldn't be needed because you should be able to see it right away. Oh, what did I call it in the view model? Database info. Wait, I'm in the wrong thing here. Good lord. I'm in database info, not database. I had to close info view. We're in generator. Where is data loader view model? Yeah, so right here we have log info here, and then it would be data loader view. We would say here. Let's see if this is what's causing it. I had it in the wrong place. I was doing it. Let's just replace and see if the state reference is recreating it, because the re-render. Yeah, it's still not working, but if I go back, it'll show the first line. So that's definitely a problem. The view model's getting created every time. That's the problem. That's one of the problems. If this view gets recreated, right, if it gets thrown away and recreated, the view model will get recreated, but we don't necessarily want that because the generator could be still running. This is a lifecycle problem. There's no doubt about it. The flaw in my design is that these almost need to be environment objects because when the view gets recreated, we don't want to recreate it because it, like it says, it has the generator. It's going to be running all the generator code. And if the view refreshes, we recreate it here. This is a flaw. Let's ask our AI overlords here for the recommendation for in Swift. How do we make a view that survives the view reloading? Let's just ask it and see if it. It is observable. Yeah. Observed object. This is what we got probably going wrong here. So then we're saying, wait, what is it saying here? So in the parent view, we'd say that it's, wait. So it's saying we need to make it a state object, which that's what we were talking about earlier. We just had state instead of state object. Why would it? See, this makes no sense. Why is it telling me state object? This is what we're doing here with Combine. So they have the same thing I was trying to do with the observed object here. They're just doing publish just like I was trying to do. And they're saying, So this has to be observed object. So let's see what happens if I use an observed object, whether or not a lifecycle is remembered. There we are. So observed object, and then we do it a second time, and third, fourth, and fifth. All right, so that's working. So that's really interesting. That means on the other one, I'm also doing this wrong. So let's go take a look at info view. Yeah, this needs to be observed object. That's what's going on. It's just it's not getting kept in lifecycle. So if I do this, bet you this fixes that view also. Okay, that's easy to fix. Easy defect. And there we have database information now. And generate sample data. If we click this, we get our log started. Perfect. All right. Hey, we're solving problems here. Yay. Let's go back to our now that we had our view model and that figured out with the state management to make sure our view models get created every time. Syntax problems. Remember to put the right annotation on it. Now we can go into our actual view model and start generating some data. So let's see here. Let's get back to our view model. Data loader. Let's make sure we have those other ones closed just so we don't accidentally write code in those instead. We don't need this right now. We might need database manager. We're definitely going to need the that. And so let's see here. So we know that we want to generate some data. Well, the first thing we need to do is say we need the ability to have we need to get the last 6 months of information, right? And so if we're to generate data, we need a date to make the creation date and the due date on. So one way to do that is we just make a helper method that goes through and figures that out, right? So we'll go through and try to methify this, basically go one step at a time to say, well, to generate this data, we need that. So let's go back to ChatGPT and say, in Swift, generate a function that returns the last 6 months as an array. Let's ask our AI overloads how to do this. I know there's a date time here, so we have array dates, calendar, date, dates, month back, 0 to 5. Oh, this looks really basic. Perfect. So we get the last 6 months, and then we can loop through those to generate our sample data. So let's go through here. So that's just gonna, well, do we even need this in a function though? Because we could, well, separation, we could test this then, that makes it testable. Yeah, we probably should do it in a function. It's just we have to loop through it here to generate it, and then we have to go through and do it again here. We're gonna loop through it twice, basically, once to get it, and then once to kind of set it. God, this is a screen that, you know what? I don't think we're not going to need that reference anywhere else. We'll just do it here. Get rid of this and say, so now that we have the last 6 months, right here, we'll say that, let's just put some, do we even need to reference the dates? We don't. And we could say get last 6 months to generate sample data from. And now we could just say here we're going to generate data to put into the database. So the first thing we need to do is come up with an expense report name, right? And so we know that we know the date, right? So we should be able to get the date from that. So we could say var. So we're looping through this. So we're going to say var dot or let report name equal for why is it mad about this? The most basic thing of assigning a variable we can't do? Expect what pattern? Xcode's lying. I was gonna say, really, if I can't assign a variable, you're having a rough Thursday, right? If you can't assign a variable. Okay, so, and then we need to add the month name and the month and year, right? So we're gonna say, well, geez, look at that. Is it listening to my microphone? Did it know that that's exactly what I wanted to do? Let's see here. What's it mad about though? So CoPilot said that, but that's not the name of it. Let's find out. Month, date, and what do we get here? I think if we do formatted, then we can get the month. All right, well, that's not working. So let's find out from our ChatGPT friends. Let's see here. So let's see here. How do I get the month name and year as a string from the date object? Let's see if it tells me. Date formatter. So we basically use a date formatter. We say the format we wanted in, and we say date formatter string from date. All right, so this is very similar to .NET, how I've done it before. And it does say that there's a US local all right, so we definitely we wouldn't want the formatter to be created every time because that's going to be inefficient. Let's do this like this, and take these 3 lines of code right here. We don't want all of it, we just want those 3. Go into Xcode, and we're going to put this back here. So this is going to be our setup. So we're going to say, and then we don't care about this, but we're going to say, here we're going to say date formatter string. We're going to say from date. Okay. And that should get us that. And then the other thing we need to do is, ChatGPT told us that for English, we definitely need to set the formatter to what localization we have. So we're going to definitely do that for right now. We'll just support this localization, but we could always look that up based on the device if we need to long term. But let's just do the location to that to be good. And then we're going to say here, this is a plus. And why is it mad? Date formatter. Date, not data. And this is from date. That should fix that. All right. And then if we just want to see if this works, right, we can just log this out, right? So we can just say log info plus equals generating information for expense report, and then we just say here report name. This is this parenthesis report name. This is the format for Swift. I always get this confused between that and Kotlin, but I'm pretty sure that that's what we do for string interpolation. Oh, info. It is log info, isn't it? Log info. And then what should happen is if when we get to this, we should get the name of those reports. And so we can go through and debug this whole entire thing to make sure our data generator is working by using this log info, which is another great thing about it. So I can just say generate sample data. We'll see here, generating expense report for July 2023. I forgot to put a new line in, so of course that's reading terribly. But if we do a new line like that, and we may even want to do this. And so where do we put our initial log? Yeah, we may want to do 2 new lines so that we can see this. And sometimes in the log info, I'll put a date timestamp on the log so that if I export it out to a file, I can see it to see what's going on here. For the sake of this log, I don't think I need to worry about that per se. But we should be generating a log of the report name that we're going to use inside the database. So we see here, yep. So July, June, May, April, March, and February. So we've got a log of the name. So if we go back to our object here, we're going to try to make one of these expense report objects. So let's see here. That's wrong. I want to get to the data here. So let's go to our model and take a look at expense report to see what we need on it. So we've got a name. We'll need to generate a UUID. That's pretty easy. We can just do that in loop. We need a description. Okay, so that's, and then we need to is complete. A document type. We already have that set. That should be defaulted to of type expense report. Right, let's see where document type is. Oh, that's wrong. That's really wrong. Actually, this should be like this. Document type. I'm glad to see this. It should be expense report. And we should set it anywhere else because that should be kind of almost like a static. Let's make sure we don't set that. We don't want people screwing up because our queries won't work then, right? So we don't even want them to set it. We want to say, hey, we're going to force that to be that. And if you're asking me, why do I need a document type field? That's a good question. Because if you've read in Couchbase Lite 3.1, we now support scopes and collections, which that's kind of the replacement for the document type, right? Scopes and collections are kind of like this storage, if you think about it for a second. You know, it's really hard to sometimes try to explain like theories of like how we do storage and stuff, right? But if you think about it, on our mobile database, we have this mobile database, and then we have a scope, and you know, I could say that, you know, if you thought about this like if you just vision like your company that you work for, if you work for a company or maybe a school, whatever, right? If you envision that, let's actually use Best Buy stores, right? Best Buy is a chain of stores here. If we were to say that Best Buy has different locations, right? So each one of these is in a different city, maybe in a different place, right? Well, if we were to say that, we can then say, well, we can find a location of the Best Buy, right? What city it's in, but we then may need to know where in the store that information is. Is it in the Apple section? Is it in the Microsoft section? In Best Buy, they have these. Is it in the monitor section? Is it in electronics, right? They have all these different sections. And if you've ever been into a store before, you know this, right? Stores have different sections of different things. And so we could say, well, if I want to find a monitor for sale at Best Buy or a MacBook Pro, I'm an iOS developer. I'm looking for a new MacBook Pro. I would say I'm going to go to the Birmingham, Alabama Best Buy store. And inside that store, there's the Apple section. I'm going to go to the Apple section. I know that the MacBook's in that area. Scope and collections work like that. Scope is like saying the city, and then collections like saying the specific place inside of that store. And that's a way of thinking about these if you're new to like how we think about like documentation databases and storing things. Now, I used to use the old example of a file cabinet where I'd say you have a file cabinet and each one of these is a drawer. You open the drawer and then inside the drawer there's a file folder that you can do that. But most people, because we went paperless, don't know what a file cabinet is anymore. I've literally talked to developers at the previous place I worked at, and I described the file like a drawer and files, and they're like, what is that? Like, what do you mean, what is that? They're like, what is a file cabinet and these file drawers you're talking about? I'm like, really? We've gotten to the point where these people don't understand that reference anymore? So if you like the file cabinet reference, that works. That's my favorite reference to say, hey, look, you know, think of the database like a file cabinet, and then the scope is a drawer, and the collection is the folder. And then inside that folder, there's a bunch of pieces of paper inside of it. Those are the documents, the JSON documents. That's the best reference I can give you to this. But because of the fact that some people don't know what a file cabinet is anymore, you may have to Google that, just like a rotary phone. The other example I try to give is like shopping. Like, you know, everybody's shopped before, went to a store, and you could try to explain it that way. But sometimes it's really hard to explain to people like how we do things. So Couchbase Lite 3.1 has support for scopes and collections, which means we don't need this document type field anymore, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to separate documents out so we can find them. And in this world where you have all these stores and all these locations and then all these different Apple sections, which one do I go to find this? That's a problem. In document types, I can just say, hey, in the entire database, just show me the documents of this type. The problem is right now today, Couchbase Capella, our cloud solution, doesn't support scope and collections with our mobile syncing. And so we're going to still use document type, even though we're using Couchbase Lite 3.1, because we don't have scope and collection support yet. So we're going to use the old style of sorting these. From a standpoint, you're going to see a performance difference in here. It's nudgeable. As long as you do indexes on the document type field, you'll be fine. And we'll go through and do that together. So we'll see how we can put indexes on these and make the queries faster. And that will make it so we don't have to scan every document in the database to find those particular document types. It's really easy to add an index. So once you have an index, the storage engine behind the scenes of Couchbase Lite, this is public knowledge. And you can see this up in our documentations, is SQLite. So we have basically Couchbase Lite, which is an engine called Fleece. And Fleece is a super fast way that we serialize documents in and out of JSON format to a format that basically we could store in a database. And then the storage engine behind the scene is SQLite, the most efficient mobile database, in my personal opinion, on the planet. That thing is super small, super fast. Everybody knows and loves it. Here's the cool thing about it. Couchbase Lite uses Fleece and SQLite as its backend engine. Swift Data, Core Data, they also use SQLite. So if you're a Swift developer and you're used to like having that performance from SQLite, from Core Data or Swift Data, you come over to Couchbase Lite, you have that almost exact same performance because we're using the same storage engine. And so just like Swift Data and Core Data are a layer that sits on top of SQLite, so is Couchbase Lite. Couchbase Lite is just like that. So once again, if you're an iOS developer or Swift developer and you see Swift Data or Core Data, Couchbase Lite is kind of like that in many ways. You're just swapping it out with something that knows how to sync to big servers. And that's the cool thing, is that you don't have to think about this. In Core Data and Swift Data, you're just synced it to the local user's iCloud account at best, which what happens when you need like this big enterprise solution that goes to all these different servers, makes it so that anywhere in the world you can see this and you can share that information, right? If I make an expense report, I need to send this to a manager to improve it. Well, you can't do that with Core Data and Swift Data because the fact that it's local, it's just in your iCloud account. Now you have to build some kind of solution to send this stuff to other people and stuff. Couchbase Lite, you don't have to do any of that. So that's the advantage, one of the big advantages of using something like Couchbase Lite. You're getting the super fast performance of SQLite. You're getting the super cool stuff of Fleece, a really easy to use SDK, and then all the sync stuff kind of just is built into it. So you don't have to think about all this. It's relatively painless to set up. Once we get to the point where we want to replicate to a server, we'll do that. Probably not today, but in the future stream, we'll absolutely be doing that and getting all that working. So if we think about this, if we go back to say, okay, well, that's the reason why we have the document type field. So we know that. We know that we're going to eventually need department, and we're going to need a created by, an update date, and an approval manager. So we're going to need all those things. Well, we already have a name here. We can get a report ID real quick here, right? So we can say, okay, let's go back to our data loader view model and say we need an ID. So we'll say up here, we can even do that before that. We can just say let document ID equal UUID, and then we can say UUID string. And that will just get us a document ID. We now have that document ID. We're done. So that was easy enough, right? Now we need a description of it. We could generate a description of that, right? Because we know that we have this date here that we're doing here, this date formatter string. So we could actually keep that as a reference, and we can put that in both the description and then the title name of the report, right? So we'll probably want to do this. Let's cut this out and say we're going to say let report date string equal, well, report date equal date formatter from date. And we can say now we can make a description of this. We can say let report description be almost the same thing as the log, right? In fact, we can just use this for the log info, right? We can just say that this is it's going to be expense report for the month for, and we'll just put our date in here, right? Our date is in report date. And then what we can do here is instead of logging info, we can just simply say here we're going to use the report description. we say here that this is / report description. And now we're getting some free stuff there. So let's see here. Oh, I forgot the parenthesis here. So Swift is man, or Xcode's man because of that. And this would be report date. And we don't need this parenthesis anymore. And what do we have broken here now? That's right. That's right. Let's actually do this. We'll say report date expenses. That looks better. And then we'll say here, this is the description is the expense report for, we'll actually put the person's name in. We should have the employee repository here. So let's get the user, because we're going to need that, right? We look here, if we look at our expense report model, we have the approval manager, which we'll have to get from the employee. We have the department we're going to need from the employee. We're missing who this is for. So we also need that. We need to say who is the expense report for. And the reason why that has to happen is that you say the created by, you say, okay, well, can't you just use the created by field for that? I mean, and that's a logical conversation to have, right? You're saying like, okay, well, yeah, it's on your mobile device. Here's the real answer, though. If you look at any large company and they have a CEO, a CFO and stuff, they don't do their expense reports. They have some kind of like secretary or assistant that does their expense reports for them. They just hand them the piece of paper and say, do it. I know this because I've worked at really large companies, and you could never have a system that basically doesn't allow somebody else to do the expense report for the person. Know this from past experience, right? Which means you then need to log who created the expense report, because if there's an error in the report, you don't want to contact the CEO. He has no idea what's going on with his expense report. He handed it off to his assistant, and his assistant's doing it. So you need to know who created it so you can go back if there's a problem and talk to them about it. But at the same time, you need to know who the expense report is for, right? And so these things need to be tracked separately, in my opinion. And we're going to use the document ID of the employee. And the employee has a, I want to say the document ID we're using is the email address, right? And we're saying that that is how we're going to store employees. And so I think we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to use the email address as saying, hey, these are the people, this is the person that this report's for. And we're going to say here, so we have this created by, we're going to say let report for, and we'll say this is a string. And then we can say here, report for, we're going to say here it's a string, we're going to say equal to this by default. And now that's going to work. And now we have this field that we can get the expense report for to say, who is this expense report for? We can even, that's probably a bad field name to tell you the truth. Let's do report for employee. Report for employee is a little bit better descriptor of this because it says, who is this report for? And by doing that, we could do a join if we need to against that to go get the employee information if we ever need to get the user profile for that person to find out other information. We're obviously going to have some denormalization stuff in here because the employee would probably have the approval manager on it, but we also can just store it directly in the report. We don't need to go back and do that join for it. And in my opinion, that is something that's perfectly fine in this kind of application. Something that normalization in the modern day, is it really needed? Well, does the manager change that often? Okay, if it does, okay, that's cool. But really, even if you got a new manager, if this report was already completed, would you want to know about that new manager? The answer is no. Let's think about this for a second, right? Because this is an important concept to understand in the modern day of building apps and stuff. If that approval manager, I just made a join against the employee record to say, give me their approval manager, what happens for history? Well, that's if I go back 6 months ago and look at this expense report. We need to know who approved it 6 months ago. I may change departments. I may have a new manager. And if I were to just look at my record, my document that says who's my current manager is, and it does have some kind of historical, then I wouldn't be able to find the person that approved this particular report. So we need to have that stored inside the report itself. Now you can say, well, wait a minute, Aaron, can't I just store the history of the managers inside the employee record and go get that? Yeah, but now you have to calculate that, right? You have to look at a date period of time and say, okay, the report was done on this particular date. Okay, give me the manager that was in that period of time. And that's a calculation you have to do, and that's cost you. That's expensive, an expensive query. It's way cheaper. Storage is no longer, it's not 1984. We don't need to pay for storage like we used to have to pay for it. So this idea of having to join against something to find the approval person off the employee is kind of silly. We can take at the point of time that the report's done, take whoever the manager is that the employee gives us, we set it there, and then we just keep it inside the report itself. That way we don't have to do so many joins for historical reasons. And this is another thing that you just learn if you've done software development for a long time and you've built these kind of systems before. You start to learn these tricks of trades. I can say when you're first starting learning how to design data and side of stuff that you need to keep around for a long time, like databases and stuff, all this stuff can be kind of tricky when you take a class. I get it. If you're new to development, I promise you one day you're going to wake up and this is all just going to make sense. And you just have to do it a bunch. Once you do it a bunch, you maybe watch some streams and get some background on like what the best ways to do this is. I promise you this will get a lot easier. And if this sounds like it's really foreign right now, I'm super sorry. I'm going to try to make this as easy for you as I can. But a lot of times you just need to do a lot of building apps with relationship databases or with us with document databases, right? And I prefer document databases these days. Relationship databases are kind of more of a, I would say it's a legacy thing for me, to tell you the truth, because document databases can scale to like ridiculously levels. And if you think about it, let's look at what's popular today, like Threads. Threads just came out. It's a new social media app, and they basically went viral, and they have like a ridiculously large amount of customers in the first day. It's millions and millions of users first day. So here it is. They're bringing out a new mobile app, and if that app couldn't scale, if they just basically built this on a relationship database and they didn't have the ability to scale that up to millions of users day one, people would log in the app and it wouldn't work. So the days of relationship databases, they're really hard to scale. Scaling these things is just not easy. They're not designed to scale. They're designed where all the data is in one little tiny database here on this server. And so there's solutions for all the different relationship data products to try to get them to scale, but they're all very complicated. Couchbase and us, as particular, and most document databases have some ability to scale to large scale. Very easy. Without having to do a lot of work. In Couchbase, it's just built into it. That's what we do really well. We scale better than most. If you look at some of our competitors, they use stuff called sharding, and sharding is a terrible way to scale. Sharding means that you have a server that has to keep track of where everything is. And that means when you're looking for something, you have to go ask the shard person to say, hey, where is everything? It's like, think of it like if you walked into an office. If I walked into like the office, I said, hey, I'm looking for Aaron LeBeau's desk. And there wasn't an ability to get that. You'd have to go to this person that says, hey, I'm looking for Aaron LeBeau's desk. Where is it? And this person says, I don't know. You have to go talk to this person over here, and they know where all the people in the office are. And then you go talk to that person. That person says, oh, yeah, Aaron, he's on the second floor. He's over in the corner by the window. And then you kind of go to the corner by the window on the second floor, and you find me, right? That is the concept of a shard manager versus having somebody like just at the front desk that can look up a directory and says, oh, I know where Aaron is. You walk into the building, and the receptionist knows exactly where I sit. The receptionist says, wait, I know where he is. He's on the second floor by the window. You go, oh, okay, I don't have to go talk to this other person. Great, I just go to the second floor, go to the window, there's Aaron. So the difference is whether or not the receptionist knows where the document is or knows where me is versus have to go to somebody else to find that information. That's what sharding is about, and that's why it kind of stinks, because you have to go to this other person, and that's a degradation of performance. It also means there's infrastructure. You have to keep that person around that knows where everything is. That costs you. I don't know what to say. That's going to cost you. It's easier to have the receptionist just have a directory that she can look in and find where everything is. That's what Couchbase does. We basically have that version of that. I'm trying to make this super simple, but we have a receptionist. These are called vBuckets. It's a little bit more complicated if I were to try to explain this in computer science terms. And if everybody ever wants me to do that, I'm more than happy to do that. So in chat, if you do that, or you can send me a message on Discord, or email, or on Twitter or social media. If you ever want to learn more about like the nuts and bolts of how things work, more than happy to explain that. But if, for the sake of this conversation, the theory would be is that's why that's what we do really well, and that's why I like Couchbase so much in this whole document database world of syncing up to the cloud and stuff. So I know that was a very long conversation to get to why we need the approval manager field in this document, but that's the reason we want it, and that's why we're not going to denormalize this out and put it into a separate document or a separate place and try to look it up. I don't think it's worth the hassle, and I honestly think it'll be a performance degradation for us, especially when we look at historical things. So let's see here. So we know that we got that. So let's see. What did we get? I did forget where we were. All right. So we have the report name, date, and description. So we're making some progress here. And we also got the report ID, which will just be the document ID. In fact, we can just name this document ID and save myself a bunch of headaches here. I'm going to rename this to see if the rename function works here. Document ID. And now I get it that the document ID is also metadata, but this just makes it easier to find it. So we're going to store the document ID twice. And honestly, in the day and age of storage, once again, if I store the document ID outside of the metadata, but also in the document, I really don't care, to tell you the truth. It makes it easier on mobile, at least, to get the document ID back to store it inside a document versus having to go to metadata. It's a separate query. There's a cost associated with that. I just find it easier to store it in here, especially if I'm doing queries on it, which I may need to do a couple joins on this. In fact, I know I'll have to do a couple joins on this because we're not going to store the individual expenses in the same document as the actual report itself. Those will be separated out into smaller documents. So let's see here. We've got document ID figured out. We've got name. We've got description. Is completed is going to be false no matter what, right? Because we're just starting to create it. Well, I take that back. What we should probably do is be able to test this for QA. So we probably should have a couple of reports that are actually completed and a couple of reports that aren't completed. Let's go ahead and do that. So since that's the next field we have, we can say if months back is greater than 1, we're going to say then we need to make let's make a var. Let's start out by saying var is completed equals false. But what we're going to do is say is if it's back, it's greater than 1 month, you should probably only have one expense report in the system at a time. At any place I worked at, you could have maybe 2 expense reports open at once, but you can't have more than that. We'll say that the business rule is you can have 2 open at once. And so we're going to say if they're older than 2 months back, we're going to say that they are completed. Because we're just generating sample data. By doing this, we'll have some reports that we can have the UI show us that they are completed and some that they're not. Well, now when we're generating our UI, that's pretty cool. So, no, it's used right here. Oh, that is. We probably could say, we could do this all one statement. We could say equals to months back is greater than 1. Then we could say this is true. Otherwise, we could say this is false. Pretty sure that will work. Or is it not going to work? Is it if? Like that? Let's ask us our AI overloads. I'm missing the syntax for let's see, in Swift, how do I use a if statement? How do I assign a value using a single line of code with a ternary let's say with actually I could just ask it for C#'s equivalent, right? I could say convert this C# code to Swift. I could just say var is completed equals months back greater than 1. Would say true, otherwise we'd say false. That is a C# version of this, and that should be valid code. And let's see what the Swift equivalent of this is. Single. So it's just it's single question mark. Well, that's what I did wrong. So this is what happens when you know too many languages, is that you sometimes can't remember the syntax. So you can say, we can say let, because we're going to say month back here. We're going to say true single quote otherwise, or single question mark otherwise false. Let's see if that worked. Is that the syntax it gave me? Oh, there's no parentheses in this, so we just say question mark 2 colon otherwise. All right, let me go back. Sorry, I had that wrong. It's this, and then we have colon here, and then we don't need the parentheses. Although I think order of operation would kick in Swift. Parentheses just being order of operation, so I'm pretty sure the parentheses probably would all right. So now we can just do that all in a single line of code, just like we do in C# and Kotlin and other languages. I haven't done Swift in a while, right? So I apologize. I've done C# and Kotlin more lately than Swift, so sometimes I'm forgetting syntax. That's where our AI overlords are coming in and help me. I know the computer science concept of what I want to do, but sometimes I don't remember the syntax. This is where AI is a great tool. We're using ChatGPT, we're using a AI search, and we're using GitHub CoPilot to help us write code better, faster. And for me, a person that's a developer advocate that has know many different languages and try to keep these all straight in my brain, this is a great tool for helping me out. And if you're a developer, this could also be helping you out. So now we have, if the report's completed, we know that we can set that. We have different sets of sample data to look at here. This will be nice for our 6 months reports looking at it. So because we want to put a little UI, like we'll probably put like an icon in there if it's completed. Maybe we'll make it green. And I don't like to use colors all the time because colorblind people, especially the color green and red, these are hard colors for colorblind people to understand. So this is such a complicated conversation about accessibility. But just remember, folks, there's people that can't see all the color frequencies that are available. And if you're a gifted person that can, count yourself lucky. 10% of the people on this planet have some form of color blindness. That's a real statistic if you go look that up. That's sad. That's sad. I feel bad for these people, and you shouldn't be building your UI in a sense that doesn't help them make decisions. So we need to have more than just a color-coded thing. We need to also have some words or some different icons that help that person see that. There's no problem with using color, but it can't be the only solution for telling somebody if something's done. So that's another tip, a pro tip. I am a big champion, I've said this before, for accessibility. I was very ignorant early in my career, and I didn't understand accessibility, and I had to take some training on it at one of the companies I worked for, and I started realizing how bad it was for some of these people, and I had gained a lot of empathy over the years now for these people. I'm also getting old, and I can't see that well anymore. I have to have bifocals, be able to see things close up. And honestly, like, I used to run my resolution. I'm one of these guys that used to have these big monitors so you can run the resolution really big, but nowadays I have a hard time seeing it. So I actually run my resolution jacked up so that I can see it better. So the fonts are way bigger by default. Like this here, you'd think that this font is just the size because of the fact I'm streaming so you can see it. No, this is the font I regularly use for coding because of the fact that my eyesight is so bad. So this is another thing that, you know, as we're designing UI and stuff, we want to try to make sure that we keep those accessibility people in mind when we're building stuff. So I think we have it's completed done here. Let's go back and take a look at our, let's see what time it is. I do have a hard stop at 4, which is in about 10 minutes. So we're probably going to wrap up the stream here, and we're going to finish it tonight. I have a stream called The Second Shift. It's super awesome. I actually stream twice a day. I stream during the day, and I stream at night. The reason why I stream during the day is to try to catch my friends over in India, Europe, etc., where it's kind of towards the evening hours for them, where for me it's in the afternoon. And in the evening, I try to do that for all my friends in the West Coast. So a lot of people in California or Texas, you know, which is more in the central time zone, my time zone. I want to stream in a time that's friendly for them also. So I try to do 2 different streams. The Second Shift is my late night stream. If you can attend it, that's great. If you're watching a video demand, it's also great. But we'll probably finish this up on the Second Shift because we're taking a little bit longer than I wanted to on this. But if we look here, we've got document ID done, name done, description done, is completed done, document type is done, report date we have, the amount. We need a random generator for the amount. The total amount will be calculated. So we're going to set it to 0 by default because the total amount for the expense report will be based on each expense type. And then we'll come back and update this based on that. Now that is a little bit complicated. What we probably want to do is that when we get this back, we want to do a join and have it calculated for us in our SQL query. But for right now, we'll keep that at 0. And then when we actually get to the point where we're adding expenses in, we'll modify that to actually be the actual amount based on the amount of expenses that we put in the expense report. So I'm going to say for right now, just to get us up and running, we're going to set the amount equal to 0. That expense amount equal to 0.00. and we're going to use doubles for that. And so that should be a double. And in some languages, I have to put the F or D after it. I'm pretty sure in Swift, we automatically, if we put... I probably should ask AI because I don't want it to be a float. Float, you lose precision. And when you talk about currency, you don't want to lose precision. In Swift, how do I set a default variable value for a double versus float? I'm pretty sure that it automatically defaults to a double, but or we may have to use double in the definition of it. Let's see here. So it is recommending that we do a double with it. What's going on here? Oh, if you just do double, it automatically defaults to 0. Well, that's even better. But we may change the code for that. So I actually prefer this syntax more. And we just do 1 0. We'll have to do some currency calculations. What's going on here? Nope. We're going to use it a little bit later on, so don't worry about it. Oh, this could be mutable, so it's right. We need to make this var because we'll change this as the we'll have to generate all the expenses after we generate the expense report, and then that will give us the total amount that we put inside the expense report itself. That's one way to do it. That's the denormalized way. The second way is we don't set the field at all, and when we query the database to get that information, it's a calculated field, we call it, where we basically have something that goes and calculates the actual amount due, and that's the better way to do it, by the way. But for right now, to keep this so we can end the stream and I can try to get most of this done, we can do that. So status, we already have known, and we're going to do that inside of our view model based on the same thing as, well, I think we already did that 1 second here. Didn't we do that? What was our view model? Data loader view model. We said it's completed, yeah. So that's the status. So is completed in status would be, we could say let status equal to exactly what that is. That sounds great. We'll just do that. Yeah, we'll do that. There's 3 statuses. There should be approved, draft, and in review. And those are usually the 3 that are the easiest way to do this app is with that. Obviously, you can get into more complicated workflows, and if you did that, you just have more status fields. And you could sort of status in the document to get the status types available. You know, there's a couple different ways to do this. We're just going to hard code it right now. And we may have to store those statuses if we build a workflow engine that goes through and checks the various statuses, see where to go. If we use magic strings or those strings, and we don't have hard code defined somewhere, that's going to be really tricky to do. And you could also store those, like, in some languages, that store those in something called enum. And for the sake of this conversation, we'll just make them strings right now. We'll probably have to change that on the fly. Department and report for employee. Well, we know the report for employee to start out with. We're going to get that from the employee that's currently logged in. So I think that's we have the authenticated user inside of the employee repository. So if we were to say let it knew what I was looking at, so it knew that, but we're going to say instead this is employee repository dot authenticated employee dot, and then we want the employee dot email, and we're going to say otherwise equal to this, and that should get us the report employee. All right, I think we're good here. We'll fix that amount here in a little bit. Oh, my wife is calling because it's 4 o'clock and I'm supposed to be doing something with her at 4. Folks, it is just about time to end the stream here. I want to appreciate everybody for watching, that watched. If you're watching video demand, the second stream should be up. Like I said, I do that. It'll be about 5 hours. It's usually at 8:30 Central Time, 6:30 Pacific Time, and then 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. And let's see here. I'm going to check to see if anybody else in Dev Club is currently streaming. I would raid them, but I don't see anybody up that I follow from coding that is currently streaming right now. So there's nobody to raid. I do want to appreciate you guys, like I said, for stopping and checking in. I'm going to check this code in a little bit here, probably after the second stream. Feel free to go check it out on github.com. The link is in my header there. You can see github.com/biozal, Biozal. Follow me on Twitter, and if you're looking for updates or threads, and otherwise I'll see you guys on the second stream. Take care. I hope you guys all stay safe and treat each other well. We're on this together as developers, so take care.